Hi, welcome everybody to the second installment of Informative Off-Grid Conversations. Our guest today is Alex Sumerall from the channel This Cob House, and he's also an earthen building professional whose focus for the past decade has been on creating earthen structures that are not only affordable, but aesthetically pleasing and functional for modern day life. Welcome, Alex, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Yeah. So earthen building, it seems like it's gaining popularity in the past few decades, and even since we started researching it a few years ago, it seems to even gaining more momentum with in the country as we see different coding laws changing to accommodate it. So it's kind of it's really interesting, and I wanted to know what really got you started into earthen building.
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I got into it originally going down the rabbit holes of learning how to build a house using non-toxic materials.
Right.
Because at the time I was going through a bit of a health crisis personally. And so that was kind of what originally led me down that path to discover Cobb and what's termed as natural building. And then learning more about it, my interest increased for more than just the health reasons. So,
Well, I mean, I thought it was really cool to know that there's something you could build a structure that is sturdy and will stand the test of time, and it's right beneath our feet.
right.
It's you could basically build from what's on the land if you have clay in your soil. So why don't you explain what Cobb is for people who might not know who are here?
Sure. So Cobb is a material used to essentially build walls with, and it's created out of basically three simple ingredients: soil, which is just the subsoil beneath everybody's feet practically; an aggregate, which is usually a rough sand or gravel; and a fiber, which is usually a straw. So you
Okay.
mix the soil, the aggregate, and the straw with water, and that creates cob. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of threw us through a loop in the past when we were doing our own research, you hear about the mixture clay, sand, and straw, and that gave us the misconception of that, needing pure clay instead of subsoil that contained clay, and that's where
Yeah.
some of our mistakes came from in the past. So it was really,
Yeah.
it was actually exciting to me to learn that it's actually just the subsoil right there that you use.
Yeah. Most subsoils have plenty of clay content in it. So it's not like you want to go buy pure clay, like a modeling clay. That's not going to work at all. That would be like 100% binder. That would be like having concrete, almost like concrete with no aggregate or gravel in it. It would have no structure to it. So you need to have there's a certain level of clay content you want. A lot of people say between 15 to 25% clay content, and then the rest is sand, silt, and gravel, some kind of aggregate. So yeah, that's a misconception. You don't want pure clay.
Now, so when I was looking and doing research on Cobb, you see in the arid regions of the world, and more desert climates where they use it, like Lebanon, Morocco. You have buildings that have been there for hundreds of years. Now, does that translate over into the building style for the United States? Is it because it's so dry there that their buildings will stand so long of Cobb? And what do we do here to kind of match that to where we'll have buildings that'll last for a long
Right.
time?
Yeah, good point. You'll notice most of those earthen buildings in arid or desert regions, they usually have flat top roofs. And that's something you can't do in like on the East Coast or in a temperate type of climate or tropical, subtropical. The way to protect it is to have a good roof overhang, and a good high foundation. If you follow these basic rules of construction, your cob or earthen structure is going to last just as long as those structures over in
the arid climates.
Yeah, those long-lasting structures you see.
Now, with some of the other, because we're not just going to be talking about Cobb today, we're going to be talking about a few different types of earthen construction. And is the rammed earth the way we do it, the way you do rammed off earth here in the United States? Is it the same way that it's just done in other countries where it came from? Because I see that it's a pretty old practice.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes down to it, it's done the same way it's always been done. Of course, now we have more modern systems, more high technology to speed up the process and to create stronger form systems. But essentially, it's just compacted soil.
Okay,
Sometimes
so this
stabilizers added to it, but yeah, it's pretty much done the same way it's always been done.
yeah, I see some of the things with the stabilizers, and I really like how it. So, is this technique being modernized with the stabilizers? Is it making it better, or is it just adapting it to the different climate in the different regions that you're building in? Because you wouldn't need to use a stabilizer, say in Morocco, correct? Because of the no rain, pretty much lower amounts
Right.
of rain.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually the stabilizer is used, and the stabilizer is usually either an addition of Portland cement
Hmm.
or lime. And they pretty much make the earthen wall more water resistant. They increase the PSI, but that's not really necessary for these buildings. You don't need the stabilizer for that. It's more for these wet regions. But again, you don't need to add stabilizer as long as you have a good roof and a good foundation. The stabilizer is really not necessary, even in these wet climates.
Well, but the stabilizer could be a requirement in some of the areas that are just getting into the Cobb regulation and coding, where they might require you to do that as just for their own coding issues, correct? But
Yeah, yeah, it's more of in some way, a precaution because there's no way to standardize soil like you
right.
can with cement or concrete. So, everybody's soil is different everywhere. And so adding the
As you saw when you
stabilizer,
came to our property.
yeah, yeah, like your clay is different in North Tennessee than it is over here in East Tennessee. So
Right.
like you can't standardize that soil material because it's different everywhere, but the stabilizer kind of adds that level of precaution. And the building departments and the coding um, add that into, because they don't understand this yet
Right.
completely.
Which is kind of crazy to me. It's we we as a human race had figured out a building technique, thousands of years ago that worked perfectly. And then it seems like we shied away from that. Like, well, let's try our own thing with some of these new unhealthy and the different styles of building, modern building techniques. And it's like, all right, now we're just kind of slowly going back to, all right, let's get back to the earth and natural, much healthier, cheaper. And
Yeah.
it's kind of funny to me.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the earthen building materials and methods make so much sense, especially for these days. I'm a little surprised if you go back in history, like to pioneer United States or the Americas. I'm surprised to see not that many examples of earthen construction used. It was all wood pretty
It was
much.
all timber, right?
Yeah, it was all timber. I mean, timber was in so much abundance at the time, especially. But still, I'm a little surprised they didn't use earth more.
I'm surprised at that too, because a lot of the settlers that first came over in the earlier periods were from England and Wales area, where a lot of cob buildings were really popular and kind of, I don't know if it originated there, but it's been there for a long time. So you're
Yeah,
right, that is a little strange that they didn't bring that building technique in when they pioneered the United States.
yeah, it's a little odd. You do see a lot of cob buildings and earthen buildings in other countries that were settled,
Hmm.
like New Zealand, Australia. Um, Not Canada. It's a little, too cold up there for a lot of that.
So
But
well, that brings up a question about, and I hear there's some misconception in just in my own part from when I was reading. Is Cobb, does it have R value at all? Is it a good insulator for a home, or do you have to take some like extra precautions to insulate if you're in a colder area?
yeah, so that's another misconception about cob and earthen wall systems is they actually have very low, very minimal R value or insulation value. But on the other hand, they have high thermal mass value. And the thermal
Okay.
mass, instead of creating a building that's like a bubble insulating a temperature inside, you're creating a building that has thermal mass walls that act kind of like a heat battery, um,
Okay.
where they naturally regulate the indoor temperature based off of the outdoor temperature, if that makes sense.
Wow.
It's more energy efficient and it requires less energy to.
So not only is it cheaper to build one of these homes, obviously if you're doing it yourself, but the regulation of the temperature inside is also going to save you some money, it seems.
Yeah, now it depends what climate you're in. If you're
Okay.
in a northern climate, you still want to insulate it. So a 2-foot thick cob wall, 24-inch thick cob wall, is going to have an R value of about 8, which about 8, or is that might even be 3 feet. I have to check on that. So if you're in a southern state, you might be able to get by with a thick cob wall with no insulation. But there are ways to insulate cob walls, and I teach a lot of that in my workshops and on my YouTube channel. I'm exploring a lot of that a lot more these days, so I'm doing experiments and sharing that stuff because the codes do require a certain insulation.
Okay. Now, what about some of the other earthen building techniques, like the rammed earth or earth bags? Do they offer similar R values in terms of insulation, or is one better than the other? Do they have are there advantages and disadvantages to each one?
So they're all essentially made out of the same material. You have cob, rammed earth, adobe block, earth bag, and then wattle and daub. They're all essentially made out of the same material, that subsoil, the aggregate, and a fiber. So they all pretty much have the same thermal mass and insulation values or properties. Okay. So yeah, they're pretty much all the same, but there are ways to insulate these different methods. Like with rammed earth, you'll see a lot of rammed earth buildings up north even. A lot of them are built, you see, in British Columbia and Western Canada, where it gets cold. And what they do is they actually build a dual wall system with a board insulation sandwiched in between 2 rammed earth walls. And you can do that with cob. That's one option to insulate a cob wall. And it's a little complex, but
I've also seen adding more straw to the mix. Does that add a little bit more insulation value?
Adding more straw to the cob mix is going to be very minimal difference. Okay. What I would do is create a dual wall system where you have basically half of your wall is going to be, well, it depends on what R value you want to have, but let's just say half of your wall is cob, and then the other half of the wall is made out of a compacted fiber. So it'd be like compacted mud slip straw mixed with mud slip, and you know what I mean? It's like a half and half. Yeah. Down here in the South, though, you'd only have to do. You could do, like, if you wanted a 2-foot thick cob wall, you would do 18 inches of cob, and then, so 8 inches of straw fiber, and then the rest cob. So not like half and half. It'd be like more minimal down here in the South.
All right. So with the wattle and daub, you called it? Yeah,
wattle and daub.
I've actually never heard of that one before. I read your ebook, which was awesome, by the way. A lot of information in there. How is that a technique that's been around just as long as some of the cob and the rammed earth?
Yeah, wattle and daub is ancient.
Okay. Yeah, but it's not as strong structurally, correct? You can't, from what I understand with the wattle and daub from your ebook, is you can't have load-bearing walls on it.
Yeah, it's a much thinner wall. They're usually really thin because all it is a lattice work of, some kind of branches or wood, and then you basically pack like a cob plaster on the interior and exterior of that lattice. So it doesn't have load bearing capacity. You see this, or it makes a lot more sense to build this way in like a hot or a humid tropical type climate. You see it a lot in like southern India, in the tropics.
Okay. Now, so do you, I was thinking a lot about this the other night, and well, we have another friend who really works with bringing like the tiny home communities to the cities, and he's really trying to bring this whole self-sustainable and more green way of living into places everywhere. And do you see Cobb being as a viable option for, say, cutting down on the homeless situation, or just giving? Do you see people being able to build Cobb homes within the less rural areas if code enforcement allowed it, as a viable option for some of the housing crises and even health crises that we're having?
Potentially in time in the future. I don't see that as a very viable option right now, because Cobb buildings take a lot of labor. There's a lot of
Right.
cost that goes into the labor. And a lot of people don't realize there is a lot of cost in all the other components of the Cobb building. So you do save a lot of money on the actual walls, but you still have your foundation, still got your utilities, windows and doors, roofing system, all the other components. A Cobb building is really no different than any other building, except you're replacing a conventional wall system with an earthen wall system.
Okay.
So everything else is the same.
And
So I don't see it right now as a way of solving like a homeless crisis problem, because
Mhm.
there's not enough
Labor.
yeah, there's no like industry set up for this quite yet.
Well,
Um,
it also seems like there goes a lot of planning into building a Cobb home. It's not just or any of these earthen structures you're building. It's not just slapping some clay together and building it. There's a lot of
yeah,
planning that has to go into this prior to the build.
yeah, especially if you're building in like an urban or suburban area where you
I'm
have to
sure even
follow
more.
the building code. It right now it does take a lot of planning, unless you're in like a place like where you guys are, where you don't have all these building codes and regulations to deal with. The planning process can go a lot faster.
Right.
So usually I do recommend people, if that's the route they want to go, they don't want to go through building codes or building departments and all that bureaucracy, go
I'm
find
sure
a
that's
plot of
expensive.
land rural out in the country where they have really relaxed building codes and regulations, and you won't have to deal with most of that at all.
And unless you're building something like a Cobb pizza oven or something in the backyard that to play
Yeah.
around with.
Hmm.
We got a question here.
It says, have you looked into the roll of bagging system to build with?
The what?
Roll of bagging. Have you heard of that?
What's it called?
Roll of bagging system?
A roll bagging system?
Yeah, or it says roll of, ROLL, roll of bagging.
Can you ask them for a clarification on what that
Yeah,
is? I've never heard of that.
what you're asking.
Okay. So if someone like we're interested, we've talked to you, you've come out and look at your land. If someone was interested in getting started with Cobb or any of these earthen building structures, what would you suggest the first steps being?
Well, just education, of course, is important. I would not jump into a building project, especially with Cobb, without understanding at least the basics of the material and how it works. I always recommend people, do as much reading as you can, but also get some hands-on experience. That doesn't mean you have to build your house yourself, but getting that hands-on experience gives you an understanding of the material and kind of what it takes to actually do this.
Right.
So just education and at least a little bit of experience.
Which actually brings up a great point. As Alex created a great online video workshop for building with Cobb that we're going to be dropping links throughout this chat, and he's also offered a discount, which we will be for the viewers of this, which we'll be letting you know at the end of the live stream. So information, education, and then probably small projects to get your hands, dirty and get some practical knowledge working with the clay and building with it.
Yeah, if you guys want materials, if you're interested in learning how to make a cob and how to get started with it, I have all kinds of free information on my website and on YouTube. I've also got the video courses online, and then I've got hands-on courses starting in April and going through the fall. So lots of information available. Yeah, let's see. Somebody asked about that bagging system,
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
the continuous bagging system. I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about. They might be talking about
They're like
the
the bags
poly,
that are long, the long
the,
tubing bags that you cut and seal off on your own.
yeah, those polypropylene
Bags.
bags. They're white and they're long tubes.
Yeah.
People use those a lot for super adobe or earth bag construction.
And have you had any experience with that?
A little bit. I don't specialize in earth bag or super adobe, but you're basically filling those bags with the same material that you'd use to make cob. It's pretty much the same thing. You
So
got to
they're
be
just all
careful.
different adaptations of the same building building
Yeah,
technique. Okay.
yeah. So it has a lot of very similar properties to a cob home or a rammed earth home.
So what
It's
is
not considered monolithic at that point, though, right?
that correct? It's not considered monolithic at that point.
Yeah, it's not going to be completely monolithic because you got the various layers of bags,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like how you'd have a brick building and layers of bricks. So it's not completely monolithic, but nothing really ever is completely monolithic unless it's like concrete. Because even a cob wall, every once in a while, has a little seam or a little vertical crack somewhere. But
Okay. So one thing I really wanted to discuss on too, talking about being monolithic structures kind of brought this up for me. When we built our Cob house, I've always had it in my brain that I wanted to dig a rubble trench and then dry stack for the foundation. And on that, after reading some of your ebook and speaking with you, it seems like that's probably not a way to go if you're a beginner and and you don't know about building a rock wall. Is that correct?
Yeah, I usually don't recommend people do the dry stack stone foundations unless you know what you're doing. It's one of those skill sets you really you want to be at a certain level to be able to build a foundation out of stone. And it's really hard to find stonemasons these days who actually build stone foundations. It's just not used anymore. So stonemasons aren't taught those skills.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Kind
if
of
you
sucks.
want to do a foundation and you hire a contractor, for example, they're not going to know anything about building a stone foundation. They're only going to be able to do concrete for you. That's not to say you can't do a stone foundation. Like especially where you guys are, you could do it and not have any problems with the building codes or anything like that. But I would at least have a basic to expert level understanding of how to do stonework.
Right. Okay. So a lot of work to go into this still.
Yeah, I mean it's not as hard as you think, but like you could take a week-long course on stonemasonry and you'd probably be competent enough to do that.
Where we are, without having to pass any kind of building code requirements, at least.
Yeah, out there, yeah, you guys probably won't have to worry about that part.
So
What do you recommend? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What do you recommend for foundation building? Like, are there options beyond stone besides concrete?
Yeah, there are options besides stone and concrete. I usually don't recommend them though, especially if you're in a county that has regulations and building codes. They're just most likely never going to let you use these other options. But there are things you can do. Brick, you can do cinder block. That's one you can do pretty much anywhere these days. But if I was going to do cinder block, I would just go concrete instead because that's monolithic and stronger. I would skip the cinder block.
For the
Yeah,
nostalgic reasons, I really want to have a stone dry stack foundation because it just
yeah,
looks really cool.
I know. They're good. You just got to do them right. That's the thing.
Okay.
Most people you see out there with stone foundations for cob homes, they don't do them right. You see so many poor examples, and that's kind of what ticks me off a little bit about a lot of these teachers out there. They're just, I don't know, it's a little irresponsible in a way. Like, your foundation is critical. If your foundation fails, your whole building fails.
Right.
So you want to put that time and that effort and that money into your foundation. It's totally worth it.
Right. So do you mostly, when you build, do you usually mostly just do concrete? Because I did see on the one Airbnb, the Hobbit House Cob home that you built here in Tennessee, that had a stone foundation on it.
Yes. Yeah.
And you did that one?
Yeah, I did that whole stone foundation. That was a dry stack stone foundation, made out of completely stones we got off that property.
Right.
Yeah, that was a great project. I love doing stone work like that. It's just stone is expensive. A stone foundation is more expensive than a concrete foundation, and it's really hard.
It seems it would be with the limited amount of people that are skilled still, as you said. It'd be hard to find someone that. Excuse me. Sorry. Go to Akita.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not only the labor cost, but the material cost. Stone is expensive, and if you're adding the material cost and labor cost, it's way more expensive than concrete work.
So adobe, that's something I'm also interested in learning, because it sounds like it's just bricks made from cob. Would we be prudent in benefiting from, or would we benefit in any way from building with adobe versus trying to mold the house out of clay? But then again, I guess that gives you limited creativity in the way you build your house, because it's in block form.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the benefits of cob, is it allows you to hand sculpt the walls, and you get more of an organic look. It's not completely plumb and vertical walls. Sometimes the walls undulate and they have little bumps on them. You can do rounded corners, all little things you can't do with things like adobe block and rammed earth. So that's kind of one of the benefits or pros of using cob, if you like that style.
When looking at some cob houses, and on other YouTube channels, they do tours of their cob homes. Some houses you see have this beautiful plastered finish on it, and then some, it looks like the entire walls are just cracking. Now, is cracking something that always happens, or is that something that is just from a bad mix in the beginning, or is it something that you're always just going to have to keep up on and kind of repair as cob shrinks, dries, whatever it does?
Yeah, so when you see those cracks, that's an issue or inconsistency with the cob mixture or the ratios of soil to aggregate usually. Okay. And that's something you want to have worked out before you start actually constructing your cob building. That's why I tell people to do a lot of testing beforehand.
We watched. Do you remember the one? You remember the one lady who gave a tour, and it wasn't very nice inside, but I mean, it was a big cob home, and I mean, the walls, they looked like they had 6-inch cracks throughout the whole wall, all over the place.
Yeah, it was like a spider web.
Yeah, and I was like, I can't be. Maybe they just didn't put plaster on it, or is it that would just be a bad mix from the beginning, right?
You said it was not plastered?
No, it wasn't plastered.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like just an issue with their mix from the beginning.
Is plaster something you always want to do?
I'm sorry?
Does that protect it in any way? Putting the plaster, what does that do besides aesthetic value?
It does protect the cob walls, and it depends what kind of plaster you use. It's important to use a vapor permeable plaster, meaning water vapor can actually pass through the plaster and pass through the earth wall out the other side. So that's either an earthen plaster or a lime-based plaster. These are vapor permeable. It's important, and I don't recommend using a cement-based plaster. because what happens is water gets trapped and actually builds up behind that layer of plaster, and it stays in the wall and saturates the wall. And over time, this can cause walls to collapse. This has happened a lot in the UK, where they've done renovation work on old cob buildings. People that don't understand the material, they've put more modern, like synthetic or cement-based finishes over the old cob walls, and the moisture builds up behind that layer and saturates the wall, and those walls end up collapsing a lot of the time, just out of nowhere.
Would that give you some mold issues too?
What's that?
Would that be a cause for some mold as well? Mold problems with the moisture building up behind the plaster between the wall?
Yeah, that could happen too. Yeah, with that. So if you use a vapor permeable plaster like the earth plaster or lime plaster, you're not going to have mold problems. As long as you have a good roof and a good foundation, your cob walls are going to stay, almost completely dry all the time. They're not going to have moisture problems. And cob walls don't have mold issues. As long as they stay dry, they don't have any kind of mold issues.
Now, when you say stay dry, that brings me to like thinking about, when there's storms and you have vertical rain coming in and hitting your walls. It's not to say that the Cob house cannot get wet. Like, it can withstand a pretty decent amount of weather and humidity without it, like, losing its structural integrity, correct? When you mean by wet, what do you mean by wet?
Yeah, a cob wall can take a lot of water before it's going to actually be damaged. Like, structurally, the integrity of the structures is never going to be damaged by a rainstorm.
Okay.
I've had
so you're talking about floods type wet is something that's going to.
Yeah, floods would be a problem. Because it would be underwater, like, for a long period of time. That could saturate and destroy a wall like that. But just rain, I mean, at the most, it's probably going to be raining for a couple days on end. And that's not going to do any major damage. That rain, most likely, if you have the right roof, it's not even going to get much on the walls. And then as soon as the rain stops, the walls are going to start drying out. I've never seen a cob or an earthen wall system have
rain damage,
structural integrity, taken out by rain or even a hurricane. It's going to be a flood or something major like that.
And that's actually, when you say hurricane, that's actually a really good point. One of the things that drew us to wanting to work with Cobb, besides some of the other reasons we already mentioned, but the fact that they're insect proof and earthquake proof. They really seem to hold up against the other elements as well. And one thing that I really did like about Cobb, it seems that if you did have any kind of issues or cracks in the wall, you could just mix up a batch of cobs and quickly repair it. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Like you were saying, though, that person who had the wall with all the little spider cracks all through it, you can't really repair cracks.
Okay.
When you're constructing a cob wall. So you make a cob wall layer by layer, and then as it dries, those cracks are going to appear. When those cracks appear, I mean, they're there. You can't really repair those at that point. You can fill them in, but that's not really gonna, fix the crack. It's still gonna. It takes away from the monolithic aspect of the cob wall at that point.
So basically, just filling in the cracks is more of an aesthetic fix than it actually is a structural fix.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it comes back to, like, it's really important to stress testing your cob mix and doing test walls and projects before you actually start the structure.
See, that makes sense.
But at the same time, like, I mean, I've done cob projects and I've seen so many other people that it's happened. You do get cracks. Cracks happen a lot sometimes. it doesn't mean your cob wall is going to fall down or have any serious issue. It's just your cob wall is not completely monolithic at that point. It's kind of like you have these big blocks, very big blocks all stacked very nicely in alignment.
Right.
Instead of having one huge block as your entire wall. Yeah.
Now, I mean, when it's no longer monolithic, I'm sure it takes away from its structural integrity at some point if those keep cracking. So I guess it all comes down to, like you said, just preparation prior to doing this and proper planning. Like we said, you can't just jump in here and start building a home. You really got to take some steps and make sure you know what you're doing to ensure that house stays up around you. Yeah. Now, are there some of the same issues with like rammed earth that you have to follow? I mean, it's a completely different type of constructing method. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that, because I really don't know too much about it.
Yeah. So one of the nice things about rammed earth is you don't have to worry about all these cracks and things like that.
And it's pretty.
Yeah, it's really pretty. And you don't have to plaster it either. Basically, how you make a rammed earth wall is you make a form to the shape of whatever wall you want, and then you put in loose soil or a loose mix of soil and aggregate into the form, and you compress it inside the form. And then you remove the forms at the end, and you have a wall. And it doesn't need to dry. It's just pretty much done as soon as you get to the top, compress that last layer of earth, wait the next day, take off the forms, and your wall's done.
Okay. And do these will stand the same test of time? You're saying they're pretty sturdy?
Oh, yeah. I'd probably say they're even stronger than Cob, because they're compressed so hard. They have a higher PSI, and you could literally
even with it being thinner.
Rammed earth walls are thick too.
Okay.
Rammed earth walls are going to be at least 18 inches thick usually. A lot of the times they're 2 feet wide as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. When I looked at them, they looked like they were less than a foot thick. So, all right.
So, and a lot of people make rammed earth veneer walls now. And you'll see these really thin rammed earth walls. Those are actually just like decorative veneer walls, though.
So no structural.
They don't have structural or load bearing capacity.
What was your question on?
Can you make the rammed earth rounded like Cob? Like Cob, you can make in a round shape, but rammed earth seems like it can only be like squared off.
Yeah, you can make rammed earth walls curved, but I'll tell you, it is not easy, because you've got to make forms that are curved, and I've seen them, and you've got to know what you're doing to be able to make those.
I'm sure that adds to a much higher expense trying to build forms that are a little bit more intricate in design as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're going to do to start off is start with we're going to be building that wall that you told us to build as a testing for our clay. But then I think before we build a house, we're going to kind of try and build a Cob pizza oven that a lot of people seems to be the start off with working with Cob.
Or a doghouse.
Or a doghouse for our dogs.
Yeah, those are good projects to start with.
Right.
Definitely.
So what else can you tell us about some other earthen things that I'm probably not very well versed in, and you obviously have experience in?
Let's see. Well, I've got a whole ebook. Let me see. Let's pull up.
Everyone, if you're from our channel and you've never seen This Cob House's channel, this book was an excellent ebook. Me and Jess read it the other night. It was pretty informative, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, it was super good. We definitely.
So let me confirm. Can you guys see the ebook on the screen yet?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And if you guys want this, it's free on my website. Let me put up the link here.
There's an excerpt that I'm going to say, and I just thought it was really interesting when you were talking about some of the earthen building techniques and how when building with earth, you really have to plan out how your cob home, I'll just use an example, is going to react with the land, and how you have to place it so that it creates, it's like an ecosystem with your land. And then you have modern construction where it doesn't matter if it's close to water, the direction of the sun, where the sun hits on it at different times of the year. It's just, you can put a modern constructed house anywhere, and then you hook it up to life support. And that's how most houses are today. And that really kind of hit home with something I was reading about before in another book that talked about earth homes and earthen building really fall in line with, how nature works, and how modern building with these 90-degree angles and can actually make you sick because it brings us out of tune with nature. And then when you talk about how modern houses being hooked up to life support, it just made it sound like, wow, it's a sick house. It kind of just all fell together for me. And I really like that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, with a cob house or an earthen wall building, you can really take advantage of things like passive solar design, utilizing the heat of the sun to help heat your house. Because cob walls have thermal mass, they'll actually absorb that sunlight during the day. Like on a cold day, they'll absorb that and then re-release that heat to the inside of the house at night when the outdoor temperature falls.
Okay.
Just one example.
I really like the idea of building the house so that it faces the sun, so that you can maximize that. But you also had mentioned in your book about hybrid houses, and I thought that maybe it would be good for us. I don't know if the temperature allows it, or if maybe we're in too temperate of a climate, but the hempcrete wall as the back wall on your north wall that doesn't receive any sun. Like, have you ever built any hybrid houses that do that so that you can have the insulation?
Yeah, I haven't actually built a hybrid building like that, but typically what people will do in more of a northern climate is do a hybrid system with a high insulation value material on the north and the west side, and then an earth material like cob on the east and the southern side to take advantage of that passive solar ability. So you have insulation on the cold side, thermal mass on the sunny side. So that insulation material could be hempcrete, straw bale, straw clay, sometimes called light straw clay. Those are pretty much the three that fall under the natural building umbrella of materials.
Have you heard of this other material called Aircrete?
Yeah. Aircrete.
It was really cool. And we watched a guy who was talking about, and it can be expensive with some of the tools and the equipment needed to build with it. But this guy really broke it down and showed ways of building with how you could do it at home with dish Dawn soap as the sudsing agent, and calcium. What was it? Calcium rock, basically concrete, I believe.
Yeah.
But the blocks were huge, and he was just picking them up like it was nothing. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, I looked into Aircrete last year because I was trying to figure out how I could implement it with certain components in my cob buildings. What I discovered is it would be really good for certain things, like if you wanted to do a domed roof. It would be really good for that, but it's not good for structural components that require load-bearing capacity. It just doesn't have the strength of regular concrete.
Okay. I see. I was under the misconception that it had really good structural strength.
Yeah, but they were building only domes out of it.
They were only building domes out of it when we watched. Okay.
Yeah, because like with a cob wall, earth walls are really heavy, very, very heavy. And so you have to put certain structural components like above window and door openings, and you have a lot of weight above those gaps. So you have to have usually like a concrete lintel, as it's called, that goes over that opening or gap, because that's holding a lot of weight of cob over it. And I don't think the Aircrete would be strong enough for those.
Okay. Well, so cob, when I was looking in a book, and I saw in Morocco, I believe it was, and they had some Cobb home or buildings. They were like apartment buildings that were like 5 to 6 stories high. Now, we potentially want to build a 2-story high Cob house. And what's the highest you recommend even going? Can you go like it? Does the wall have to get wider or be wider at the bottom, and then you said it tapers up, I believe?
Yeah, so you can taper the walls as they rise up. You can
So
still
you'd have
make
to have
them.
like a 5 or 6 foot wide wall at the bottom if you want to taper up over a few stories, correct?
Yeah, potentially. That's not to say you can't do perfectly plumb vertical walls all the way up for like a 3-story building. Actually, let me see if I can pull up an image, a couple images here too. But let me say first, so yeah, you can definitely do multiple story buildings with Cob and earthen wall systems. But actually right now, the official Cob Building Code, which is the 2021 IRC, limits you to a 1-story building right now.
Okay.
Perhaps in a couple of years, they'll update it to where you can do 2 stories or above. But right now, if you're using the Cob Building Code, you are limited to 1-story buildings. But let me pull up some images here of some different Cob buildings.
Yeah, let's see
Can you
what
guys
got.
see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me pull this one up. Can you see that?
Coming up, I think.
Not yet. Oh, hold on. I gotta reshare. Hold on.
There we go. It pulled up there. It just clicked off now.
Oh, okay. Can you see that pretty big?
Oh, I see black screen right now.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah,
You had it come up before. It just took a second.
Let me try this again. Oh, no, it's not working. Sorry, guys, for the technical.
No worries.
difficulty. Try this one more time.
While you do that, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Someone is wondering what the seismic strength of Cob is, and if it's not, if you can use reinforcements like rebar or mesh, if that does help with it.
Yes, yes. Especially if you're in a high seismic area, like on the West Coast, for example, you're definitely going to have to use steel reinforcing in the Cob walls, like rebar. And the new Cob code specifies all these details, what kind of reinforcement you need depending on your zone. There's different systems depending on what you want to use, and it goes into vast detail on all that. But I would recommend it if you're in an earthquake zone. You probably want to use some steel reinforcing in the walls. So,
and we can see the picture now too.
Okay, awesome. So this is a 3-story Cob building in the UK. This was constructed by Kevin McCabe, and you can actually see this on a TV show called Grand Designs. They documented the construction of this building, and Kevin McCabe is a master Cob builder in the UK, and he constructed this Cob building.
Is that a living roof on the top?
Yeah, that's a living roof on the top.
And what does the living roof consist of exactly? Because I was interested in that, but what is the benefits versus a regular style roof?
I'm not an expert on living roofs.
Okay.
They're not the simplest things to do either. Again, it's one of those things you're not going to have an easy time going through building departments with a living roof. Basically, a living roof, though, it insulates from a lot of heat. It keeps your building cooler. Some people grow, grasses or decorative plants or produce on the roof. I'm not a huge fan of them.
That would be what I do.
Yeah, but they have problems like, if you don't do them right, they can actually be very expensive to do right. And if you don't do it right, they leak and they can be a big mess.
And cause a whole bunch of headaches in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's one of those things you got to really know what you're doing.
So you could have a basement with a Cob home. You just have to, the foundation, I guess, just has to go down. And that's not something you would recommend with a rock wall either, if you don't know what you're doing, I'm sure.
Yeah. If I was going to do a basement for any kind of building, really, I would do it with concrete. And I've got a section on basements in the ebook. If you want to download the ebook on my website, it's free. It goes into some detail on that.
Yeah, everybody, please check that ebook out if you're interested in earthen building, because it really is good.
And here's an image of the inside of this building. You can see it looks modern. It has a sense of luxury and cleanliness to it. A lot of people are turned off by the idea of an earth building or an earth home because they think it's just a mud hut and it's dirty. This is not the case if it's done correctly.
Yeah, that looks magnificent.
It does look magnificent. Now, obviously, a scale like a house of this size, there's a lot of labor that's going to go into that. There's probably a large team that build this over a pretty long period of time, correct?
Yeah, this particular building, I mean, this is huge. This is a 10,000 square foot building, and it was constructed over, I don't know, probably at least 5 years. It cost, I think, at least over £1 million.
Oh, wow.
So this is, they call this the Cobb Citadel for a reason. This is on the extreme large spectrum. But that brings up a good point. You can build a Cobb home or earth home very small, like a tiny home, all the way up to very large like this. So there's really no limitations there.
And that's even a misconception that I had from the beginning too, was on the cost of it. I thought the cost was going to be just down all the way across the board, but you're right. There's still a lot of things that do cost money that go into a Cobb home. It's just the walls and the basic bones of the house that you're building out of mud. You still have the rest that go into it to finish a house.
Right. And then the labor cost on top of that.
Well, also getting someone else to build it for you versus building yourself, I'm sure is a drastic price reduction by doing it yourself. But
absolutely,
the labor cost is where you're going to feel it.
Yeah, that's why I teach the classes, because if you can build it yourself, you can probably save 50% of the cost.
Oh wow, even that.
Because a lot of the cost goes into the labor.
So if you want to, Alex, if you want to drop or just drop a link to the Cob course as well. Yeah. So everybody who's watching, Alex has a pretty comprehensive Cob video course. If you can't make it to one of these workshops, he has it all in a video format for you. And he's offering this at a 50% discount to everyone watching this live stream by using the code Little House.
Yeah. Little House. Just go to the checkout page and there's a form field that says discount coupon. Just type in Little House and that'll give you 50% off the entire course. And the course is over 16 hours of video lessons and the ebooks. So tons of material.
And this goes into a lot more in depth than the videos that they're going to find on your YouTube channel. Yeah. And I know you also get membership to a Facebook group where they have direct contact with you as well if they have questions, correct?
Yeah. And actually the best way to get in contact with me is by email. You can just email me directly with your questions. Let me put my email up, or it's alex@thiscobhouse.com. And just feel free to email me there.
Wow, this hour's almost going quick. Do we have any other questions that we want to get answered before we because we're getting towards the end? Is there anything else while we're waiting for any questions that you felt that was pretty important information that should be shared?
I have another question really quick. Whenever
Oh,
you're
yeah.
putting like electric and running your water and all of those things that normally go inside of walls, do you still put them in there, or how do you get to them, access to them to fix them once you build cob around them? Like,
Yeah, good question. So the first rule of thumb is don't put any water pipes through cob walls. I would either run those down underneath and up through the foundation or the slab, or through a concrete stem wall foundation. Don't run those through the earth walls, because if you have leaks, it'll saturate the wall and you can't get to the leak to repair it. With electrical, you can either embed conduits into the cob wall so you can run the wires or replace the wires later, or you can attach exterior conduit to the inside of the cob wall for more of like a modern industrial look.
okay.
But the electricity obviously can't harm the cob wall. Cob walls are fireproof, so there's no danger there.
Another added benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, if you're on a property that's completely off grid, and I've seen some buildings on YouTube where I guess they did bring the water through the window instead of actually through the wall. Okay, but is there a way that you could, with I guess hybrid, if it's not all cob, and then bring it through, like you said, a concrete stem wall? That makes sense. Okay, I'm just trying to visualize it in my head.
Yeah, and then like if you want to have interior walls inside the structure that are made out of like stud frames or wood, you can run your electrical and your water through those hollow walls. Like, for example, you can have your kitchen on one side and your bathroom on the other side of that wall, and just run all your pipes through that interior wall. So if you do need to make repairs or access to them, you can. That's a good strategy.
Okay,
So
it's kind of like an aesthetic wall to hide any of the back the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we have a question here that says, how does the Cob house hold up in extremely white winterlands, like North Pole temperatures?
Probably not suggested.
Hi, Canada.
Hi, Canada.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really in a very northern climate, I might not recommend earthen wall systems. Just depends how far north you are. Because, I mean, there are lots of examples of successful earthen wall structures in Canada. They're insulated, though. So it really just kind of depends on geographically where you are and what your climate is.
So, I mean, so you could pretty much, like you're saying, you could build a hybrid type style of a cob home and to suit the climate that you're in. So if you are in these farther northern Canadian temperatures, the climate, there probably still are steps you can take to where you could at least partially build with cob, correct?
Yeah, it's very possible. And like on the worst case scenario, if you really like the earthen wall look or aesthetic, you can make a straw bale structure or some highly insulative structure, or even a conventional timber structure, and then do earthen plasters, covering these walls, and you still get those pretty much the same look for the most part, but you're using an insulated material. So like I teach how to make the plasters in the ebook, in the video course, and the hands-on courses. That's all in the curriculums if you want more information on that.
Very good. And next question we have here is, can you use cleats for mounting sockets and such?
For mounting soffits?
Sockets. I guess like socket. Electrical sockets.
Oh. I think so. Not sure what you mean by a cleat, to be honest. Use cleats. But you can mount sockets, like electrical sockets. They can be mounted to a cob wall, or they can be embedded into the cob wall. There's
Okay.
several ways to do that.
So is once you build up a cob wall, are you pretty much, if you didn't pre-design something into that, are you pretty much stuck with it, or is there room for making modifications after the home's dry and the walls are solid? Are you able to knock down a section of wall to, even if you're adding on an addition, or to correct maybe something you didn't think of when building?
I mean, you can. It kind of depends on the situation and what you want to do as a modification. Best just to avoid that if you can, and do as much pre-planning as possible.
The reason I say that is because, we want to build our cob home, and we're going to start with a livable space that's smaller. Are we going to be able to then add on to that smaller, structure that we built to build a bigger home that we see as the final house?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several ways you can integrate a new wall onto an existing cob wall.
Okay.
Whether you pre-plan that or not, I mean, there's always some options. Really, the complexity of that comes in if you're going through the coding building department systems.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you're really going to have more roadblocks with that.
Okay, and I'm just trying to get an idea, because it seems like Cob has some features that make it a really easy material to work with, but then in other ways it can really it seems harder than some of the conventional building methods that there are today.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve for it all, but in the end, you're getting a structure that's going to last for potentially hundreds of years, as opposed to a conventionally built structure that's pretty much designed to last a generation or two and then be torn down and then rebuilt.
Well, and then you have to look, like I said in the beginning of the stream, we had a building method that, our ancestors used for so long that worked great. And then we decided to kind of go off and do our own thing and try all different building materials. And we got stuff like asbestos or, hazardous materials that make you sick that we built with for years because we had no idea, when we've had thousands of years of like tested building, techniques that say this won't make you sick, this works, and this will stand the test of time. Hold up against the elements, and we're just like, nah, we don't want any of that. We want to go build with the cancer causing stuff.
Yeah,
it seems weird.
Yeah, it's a shame. I suppose it's got a lot to do with the industries of construction and the whole money of that all. But yeah, I mean, an earth wall, you get rid of the toxicity of a big one, drywall, and then like synthetic paints. But drywall is just a mess for mold. If you have indoor allergies or chemical sensitivities, an earth wall building is definitely the way to go.
Is earth walls, like I saw it did something about removing allergens?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit? How does it do that?
Well, I guess it depends what the allergen is. Mostly like molds and just ingredients that would be normally in conventional building materials for walls.
They're just not there.
Yeah, just not there. Yeah.
Okay.
And possibly the vapor permeability of the wall might have something to do with that, being able to kind of
breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of clears the air, kind of purifies the air naturally.
Okay.
Question: if you're going to build a roof, an earthen roof, or a roof out of earthen material, how thick would you need to build it to support a snow load?
Yeah, that's.
Is it even possible to build an earthen roof? It would have to be in like a desert, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, is you're not going to build an earthen roof unless you're in a desert. So yeah, that wouldn't really work.
Get there.
Right. Okay.
And then the next question we have here is have you ever had any issues with toxic mold in humid climates with Cob?
No, No.
No.
So a lot of people are worried that you'll have a mold problem with cob in humid, subtropical or tropical climate. It's actually completely not the case at all. I've done a lot of this work down in Florida, and that's where you would have this problem, and
Right.
there's none of it.
The humidity there is ridiculous. So if it was
Yeah.
going to happen anywhere, it would be there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dirt, it just cleans it. Like it just cleans the air and the. It would just seem like it would just clean it.
Well, what
It's like a filter, almost like you have filtered walls.
filtered walls?
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it. It's a great marketing thing. Cob walls, filter your air.
Yeah.
Was that the last question?
Yeah, that's what we got so far.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Is there anything else you wanted to add, or anything else you wanted to show?
Yeah, I could go on for hours and hours. We'll have to do
we could talk for hours and hours. This is just going to be a general introduction for people, and and even I'm learning a few things from this too. Even after reading your ebook, which again, everyone go read it. It's great.
Yeah, read it. It's just super.
Yeah, no, this has been great, and thank you all for chiming in with your questions. I would love to do this again so we can answer more people's questions.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first of hopefully many as we get further and further along even our process of building a cob home.
Yeah, definitely. We could keep doing these, like in the process of you guys doing your project, and keep updating people, educating people.
Sounds awesome. Right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think that's a pretty good place. We've gone on for a little over an hour now. Everybody, we wanted to thank Alex from This Cob House for being here with us. And again, if you're interested in his Cob video workshop, the link's at the bottom of the screen. It also is in the description of this video. Check it out. It's information packed.
And 50% off is an amazing deal.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm here, everybody.
Discount code Little House to get 50% off.
Right.
All one word.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One word.
Again, thank you so much, buddy. I look forward to the next time speaking with you. This was really fun.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I want to encourage my viewers to go over to your channel, which is Little House Off the Griddy. And how do you spell Griddy? Is it
Griddy? 2 D's.
Okay. Yeah, let me see if I got a link to that. I just want to throw that in here before we wrap it up.
Cool. Thank you so much.
And vice versa, guys, because Alex has a.
There we go.
But you know what? I was telling Jess, it was when we first got interested in building with Cob, we were in LA, and we were ever going to be able to build a Cob house in LA, but we were very much trying to find a loophole. And I came across your channel on and you were actually a lot younger than it seemed, and you had a lot of information on different codes and building with Cob. So you were actually my first introduction to Cob a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, here's the link to their YouTube channel. They've got a really cool channel going, documenting their off-grid journey and how they're living their lives off-grid in Tennessee, north of Knoxville, correct?
Correct. Made a transition from Los Angeles to living off-grid is a completely different lifestyle to us with no experience, but I'm very proud of us that we've actually made it through a winter, even though it wasn't too harsh, but still we haven't had cold weather in years. So I'm proud of my wife and myself for, pushing through. Many times going out chopping wood at 4 a.m. in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So guys, go check out their channel. It's really cool, really fun.
Thank you.
The way they edit and put together their videos is really cool. They're doing like a storyline type style now, which is really fun. So yeah.
Right on. All right. Well, again, we'll see you the next time. See you later, everyone. Thank you for being here, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.